Arganissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today at www.arganissima.com. Arganissima, New York. Your beauty is our duty.
All right, folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, new day, new show, new topic. Well, maybe not new topic, because this is going to be the debut of a new series, been announcing it. We had a preview to this particular show. So the first one we did was a general show to just kind of bring into you guys some basic legal, not advice, but just tips and discussion of topics that are very dear to health, or they're linked to health, which we were talking about wills and trusts. And the show was pretty long, but it was because there's so much stuff going on. So we decided to actually have a series of these with our own legal, guy, our own attorney here. And, he's going to have this show dedicated to him and to you, really, because this is for you as audiences to really learn the tricks of the trade, as they say, and learn new things that you might be potentially needing. Because as we've watched the last show, and I'm being again evasive and suspenseful, because you might be like, well, which show was this? Well, this was the show that we talked about the wills and trust, right? And we have with us Nick Khalifeh, who is an attorney that specializes in will, trust, probate, and all that stuff. And he's going to talk about all the good stuff. It's a lot of meat and and potatoes in this, and it's a New York, I guess predominant show, but a lot of the stuff may touch on general law and things like that. But again, I'm not the expert. I'll defer to Nick, who is the host really of this show, not me. So Nick, welcome back, and we're looking forward to this series, because I think that's going to be a great forum and an opportunity for people to learn things. How you been?
I've been doing well, and thanks for having me again. I didn't realize you gave me a promotion this morning. Now I'm the host. I thought I was the residence attorney.
This is yours, dude. You're the expert. I'm just here, hosting this. Maybe I'm the producer here, but you are really the actual, show. I mean, you are the actual target. You are the star. You are it, because I can learn things from you. I've watched the show that we had. I've learned some things, but I can never relate that information correctly. and frankly, this is a series, as you and I we were talking about. There's a need, and this is going to be your series. This will be your hour, and we just basically want to bring that information to people. And I know, because we talked generally, and we kind of went crazy, in terms of like a lot of the concepts, because it's a lot of stuff. We're gonna go now step by step, and you're gonna break it down really one week at a time, one show at a time, with one topic, and we're gonna go deep dive and make sure that people understand what that means and how they can proceed. So Nick, this is yours. I'm gonna be like on the back burner here, so you'll be actually the front center. So this is Legal Tips for Life with Nick Khalifeh. So Nick, all yours, baby.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction. And just give your viewers a little recap on how this whole conversation started. This was supposed to be a one-time interview. It appears that we have great chemistry, and there was so much to cover that you and I had this conversation. We said, you know what, it sounds like we have something great here that's very useful and valuable to the viewers and everyone. And the beauty about the subjects that we talk about, these subjects apply to everyone, and with no exception. The fact that everyone needs a will, and that's just the basic aspect of it. Everyone needs it. And as we move forward and progress in life, there's many other estate planning tools. Now, as you mentioned, we decided to name the show and call the show Legal Tips for Life. And one of the reasons is we've mentioned last time that there's this taboo around estate planning and wills, and which is something that I've experienced and I've observed and noticed in my day-to-day practice. Like I mentioned, everyone needs a will, but when the conversation comes down to it, I'm always chasing clients around, to get the will done. And there's this taboo, and that we discussed last time, that seems to run across all cultures and all backgrounds. That for whatever reason, people are scared to have the conversation. It's uncomfortable. I understand why it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to think about these things, but unfortunately, we have to. And part of the reasoning why we named the show "Legal Tips for Life," not estate planning, which is what we do is estate planning, but we're trying to change the narrative. Instead of having people think about death, we want them thinking about life, how to protect everything they earn. Everyone works hard to build a legacy for themselves, for their family, to pass it along, and that's a common goal for everyone. I have not met anybody thus far, regardless of what they do, how much money they make, what they specialize in. Everybody's driven by the same goal in life, which is to build something better so they can pass on to their children a better opportunity, a leg up in life, and protect their legacy, protect their name, protect their hard work, and protect their families moving forward. Because once a parent passes, regardless of how old the children are, there's a vacuum in the family, and regardless of how old we are, it doesn't matter. We always defer to our parents. We always feel that our parents are there when we need them. So, as part of life and planning for our children, having a will, having an estate plan, it's one of those vital things that everybody should start thinking about, regardless of how old they are. Whether you're 25 years old, just graduated from college, and you're about to start your own job, and now you're starting to acquire a little bit of savings. We mentioned that you should always have a beneficiary on your account. So just to kind of give a quick recap to the last show where, and I appreciate, by the way, the viewers who are joining us again. I received great feedback. Many of you sent us some good emails with good questions, which inspired us to take this show and turn it into a series, and we're going to continue this conversation. So today we're just going to give a quick recap about wills, and we're going to get into the discussion about trusts, and we will discuss the revocable trusts. Last time we kind of discussed the entire estate planning, and we talked about the wills and the revocable trust and irrevocable trust, and especially there's so much to talk about in this area of law that really it's going to take us many shows. So I think to make things easier on everyone to follow, we're just going to break it down. So this show is going to be a recap about wills. So if you're joining us for the first time, we're going to give you an idea and a recap on what we discussed as far as wills. Then we're going to go into the conversation about setting up a trust, a revocable trust, why you should, what a trust means, what it does, and why you should consider having one, depending on where you are in life.
Thank you. That's actually perfect, because you're right. I mean, we did have great feedback, and it was a lot of information. But like I said earlier, it is not something that is easy. There's loads of books and books and books about this stuff. And so you are putting all that knowledge over the years in a couple of hours, and that's still not enough. But definitely the idea and the need to break it down to further sessions and just kind of synchronize a little bit and centralize it and focus and hone in specific topics. And today, I mean, to your point, it's going to be a quick recap, and then maybe we'll talk about as you said, the trust and the will. And that's it. I mean, then next week or the following chapter, we will just dig into a different topic and then explain and so on and so forth. So first of all, Nick, thank you for what you said. I mean, this is an exciting topic, and it is about life, and it's ironic because this thing happens with that, but really it's about the legacy. It's about people feeling the need to have some protection, beyond life, and really for the living. And so it's kind of sounds very weird, when we put it that way. But as we said the last time, the one thing in life that is certain is death, which is as crazy as it sounds, it is true. And you had shared some real interesting stories about people without wills, without trust, without putting anything in place, and then the risk that can happen from that lack of decision making or lack of preparation and being prepared for the known, because it's not really the unknown, it's the known. We know it's happening, and so it's just a matter of when. And that's the other thing, nobody knows when, and so we have to be prepared at all times. So with that, let's just take it back to what is the basic elements that we need to at least be aware of, and then we can take it from there.
Exactly. So basically, as I mentioned, as an attorney, of course, the advice is everyone should have a will. Everyone needs a will. And I received this feedback from certain clients sometimes. They'll say, well, I'm young, I don't have many assets, I don't need a will now. Maybe in the future, maybe when I get married. So what appears to me, and just to take a quick pause here and just kind of bring the viewers up to speed on certain things. The theme of the show is we're basically trying to take these legal concepts and explain them in a language that everyone can understand, and give real life examples of real cases, of real stories that I come across every day, which people can relate to. Because just a basic explanation or the complicated explanation, the legal explanation of why, the significance of why you should have a will and what happens when you don't, we get into this nitty-gritty like legalese and terminology, it turns people off. Understandable. And I think I gave an example last time. I said even in law students in law school, fell asleep sometimes. It was that, after half an hour of a professor talking about complicated legal concepts. So what we hope to bring to everyone here is just average, day-to-day, normal, just simple, plain language conversation that people can actually relate to. And if you're an attorney watching this, you're going to get the legal concepts and hopefully enjoy the conversation as well. But for most people, and I've watched many videos of many attorneys and topics on this subject, it was very legally, the terminology was very legally, it's packed with legal terminology, the conversation. So here we're going to stay away from that. Of course, we're going to explain the legal concepts and the significance and what they mean, but we're going to discuss and explain these issues in a very easy language, easy to follow, and give real life examples. So just to go back, I always get that feedback or the questions like, well, I'm young, why do I need a will? So we're going to explain what happens when you have a will, what happens when you don't have a will, and why everyone should have a will regardless of what other estate planning tools that you have, whether you have a trust, from the basic to the most complicated trust. A will is still significant. So what happens if you don't have a will? If you don't have a will, that means, and every state has its own what's called interstate laws, meaning if you pass away without a will, the state law determines who inherits from you, who your beneficiaries are. So depending on who's alive at the time, depending on your marital situation, whether you're married, divorced, you have children, single, don't have children, do you have siblings, and the size of your estate. So you pass away without a will, all of a sudden everybody's scrambling to access your house, to access your safe deposit box. They don't know what assets you have, whether you have or you may not have certain assets. We also gave an example of what happens if you pass away in a car accident, or there's a medical malpractice, the medical procedure that went wrong, and now, unfortunately, the person is deceased. The will has what's called an executor. The executor is the person you nominate to be in charge of your estate. So if you have a will and the will goes to probate, that executor gets nominated. You nominate that executor, and that executor gets the official appointment by the judge. Once the executor receives that official appointment by the judge, then the executor is able to represent your estate legally. And when they're able to represent your estate legally, they have access to all your property. They can liquidate, distribute, and they can also initiate lawsuits on your behalf. So in the event you pass away in a car accident or in a medical procedure that went wrong, if you have a will, we know exactly who the executor is going to be. And that executor, excuse me, and that executor, once he or she gets appointed by the judge, they'll be able to sue on your behalf and go after the insurance, the medical malpractice. And it's not just about suing people. It's about, and nowadays, everybody has a social media account. Many people are making a living on social media, doing YouTube shows, podcasts, things of that nature. Who's going to deal with all these issues, with these accounts, with your property after you're gone? So the fact that whether you do have assets now, you're young or not, you should always work on the will. And as we mentioned, it's called estate planning, because you're always planning for the future. And what happens to the plan? A plan has to be fluid and flexible. So we mentioned that if you have a business plan and you open up a business, your business plan does not remain the same. So you don't just have a business plan, you open a business and your business plan continues to be the same for 10 years. Unless you're not growing, then that's the same plan. For the most part, you're always having to go back and make changes as you progress, as you grow in life, you acquire more assets, you start making more money, you get married, you have children. You always have to go back and revisit your estate planning documents and the will. So just a quick recap. When you're thinking about a will, you're always thinking about who's going to receive after I pass away, the beneficiaries. Who's going to be my, excuse me, who's going to be my executor? The person who's going to be in charge legally to represent your estate. And it's a job, and I always tell people it's a job, so you want to make sure whoever you nominate is somebody who's up to the task and somebody who's able to deal with attorneys and filing the will to court, probate, what we call, and then distribute the assets and handle your estate. And it's not an easy job. And that's where the trust conversation will come next, why we recommend the trust and why, in my opinion, everyone should have a trust regardless of what they own, how much the assets that they have today. And we'll get to that reason why in a second. But just to go back to the will, so you narrow down who the beneficiaries are, who's your executor going to be, and the percentages, who receives what, how much. So if you have children, how much you want to give each child. So we have what's called the general bequest. You can basically pool all your assets and say, everything is divided equally, for example, or we have what's called a specific bequest, a specific gift. And that comes in an example sometimes when there is a mother who has one daughter and a few sons, and she wants her ring or jewelry to pass to the daughter. Or she has a couple of daughters, and she wants certain jewelry to go to this daughter, and other jewelry or gold or whatever it may be to go to someone else. So that's basically the gist of it. What happens if you don't have a will? It's a nightmare. We have to exactly look at state law, see who's entitled to receive, who the beneficiaries are, get their consent. We have to find somebody who's willing to become the administrator. So the administrator and the executor is pretty much the same position. The administrator is a person who gets appointed by the court that the beneficiaries agree to, consent to. An executor is a person that you nominate in your will, if there's a will, and gets appointed, still has to go through probate and gets appointed through the judicial system by a judge.
Thank you, Nick. So before we proceed, I just wanted to just kind of like almost not recap what you recap, but more like just for a clear understanding. So basically, the will is like I have my wishes while I'm alive. I have to, potentially write them down somewhere legally where I have protection, and I can determine who is going to get what, when, and what percentages, and what I have, what assets, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, by providing that information upfront and having it legally, it will make life easier for anyone that's left behind. To your point, things can happen. And you mentioned something about podcasts, YouTube, Facebook. I mean, even an account Facebook, somebody has to shut it down, God forbid, right?
Correct.
you alluded to the business portion, which is an important, concept. That's a very, very excellent point. Well, in life in general, we have to plan things, right? You go on a trip, you pre-plan. Everything is pre-planned, right? You got shopping, you pre-plan. You got a list of things, right? You start a business, you have a business plan. But nothing that you start planning with winds up the same. For the most part, we always have to adjust and adapt. So I love the idea that you mentioned that, this is not something that's going to be one time and you're just going to leave it behind. You're going to have somebody, an attorney, someone that actually knows this business well and will guide you through the process. Because again, the legal system can be a little bit, convoluted. It can be a little bit, challenging. And once you depart, there's nothing else. It's over. If it's not determined in advance, no one has the right to do anything about your stuff and deal with your things, unless they have been appointed somehow. And then you mentioned the executor, somebody that is actually assigned to do these tasks, on your behalf. But the pieces you mentioned something about I'm young, and that's actually the attitude for a lot of us. When we're younger, we don't worry about life, or that rather, we worry about life mostly, right? Like we just live. What happens, it happens. But you're right, we acquire things over time. We don't pay attention. You start with a car, you start with a house, you start with savings accounts and so on and so forth. And that's accumulating. And then you mentioned it. Life happens. You marry. You have kids. Things happen in life. And you mentioned something about you can go to hospital. Everybody. I mean, we had the pandemic recently. God forbid. A lot of people wind up in the hospital. And you gave a good example last time where people went to there for one reason and they wound up not coming out, and people were stuck behind. And during the pandemic, you had also the courts that were closed, so it was a nightmare. So the fact of having this wish written down, document with the specifics, and having some sort of a peace of mind that that your loved ones are going to be in a good hand, it's not an indicator that I don't want to think about that. It's really about I want to think. I mean, if we love our loved ones, right? We do love our loved ones, and we want to make sure that they're happy. They may be sad about us departing this world, but we want to make sure that they don't struggle behind. We do everything in life to make sure that our kids and our families don't struggle. But then we don't, the one place that we actually kind of stop thinking about is that what happens beyond us. It's like almost, we don't have to be selfish a little bit, because I think sometimes that is the case. And it's just about me, but it's not really true, because it's about our families and everything. But when it comes to that, we kind of like try to evade that discussion. It's like, to your point earlier, it's a taboo. It is a discussion that people don't want to even think about. What is a reality? And your concept of bringing this to the show to people, because yes, we're going to drill it. It might be a little bit of a hard topic to swallow or absorb, but it is real, and we need to do that. And it's very simple. A document called will, and there's more. There's actually, we're going to talk about the trust piece of it, but really it's enumerating the things that you have, the who, the what, the when, and so on and so forth. And therefore, you have representation to take care of it. And then you just said it, the idea is that somebody also has to be appointed to do all these things. And hopefully everybody. So whether you have small tasks, small assets, or large assets, the idea is to have something prepped, and also to revisit these things as things change in your life. You start a will at 20, which could be the case, and you live to 60. That will is probably going to change a few times during the course of life, right? So before we proceed to the next level, what would be the steps to do that? So you are effect one, start one, right, at a start point. And then how frequently do you advise, Nick, the people to actually kind of revisit their wills? Is it, as they acquire things? Is it as they acquire particular things? Is it because they have not more kids or, more, change in the family? Sometimes people go through divorce. That's the other thing. We can talk about that too. You have, one person nominated in here because that's a spouse, and the next thing you know, there's no more spouse, and you have to change some things. So how do you, advise people with this particular transition?
Great question. So I normally, in my wills, I try to minimize for the client the need to come back and make corrections, additions, and changes as far as drafting an all-inclusive or something, substantive that covers as much as possible. However, I always tell clients, you want to revisit these documents when you have major events in your life. So, for example, if you have nothing or not much, a little bit, we'll make it as general as possible and say everything is left to so-and-so, right? Then 5 years later, now you have a house, you may be engaged, you may be married, you may have children, or you may be divorced. So your life has changed. So, once you have these major life events where there's major changes, personal or financial circumstances, and so you always, that's when the time you want to go back and take a look. Is my will is my estate plan, generally speaking, whether it's a will, trust, whatever the case may be, is it still viable today? Does it still accomplish what I said it to accomplish? And so sometimes people say, well, what's the point if I don't have much now and I have to come back later and keep changing? Well, as you mentioned earlier, unfortunately, the reality of there's nothing more certain, right, than death and taxes. So, and we've mentioned, I do real estate and estate planning, and I'm one of those advocates of try to pay as less taxes, legally speaking. So that's what I also help people, and that's what estate planning does. It's also an attorney who sits and examines your estate planning as you move forward, as you acquire more assets. We're able to give you good advice, especially when the attorney has experience dealing with real estate, business, estate planning, and taxes, because all these are connected. Because when you're doing an estate plan, you're either employed, there's money involved, you're either also possibly you own a business, you're married, you have children, ex-wife, children. Everybody's situation is different, but everybody has one of those. It's just, if you're alive, you're working, you own the business, you work for somebody, and you're doing things, you're living, and that's what we do. So, you always want to go back and visit these plans and take a look, and you never know when something happens. I have friends of mine, we all have, like, in our personal lives, right? If you think about it, we can all think of someone we know who passed way too soon, and you probably heard that many times in funerals and friends. Like, wow, this was a great person, young, he was healthy, passed away too soon. So that can happen to anyone. So, and I think also because it can happen to anyone, it's one of those things that people avoid having a conversation. I do this for a living, and I don't want to think about it either. For myself, I want to think that hopefully this will never happen. But the reality is, being a realistic and rational person, that at some point, we don't know when. Hopefully later than sooner. But like I said, the time is now. If you're asking yourself right now, when should I start thinking about my estate plan? When should I talk to an attorney or do my own research about wills and trusts and things like that? It's now, because we're living life. We don't know what happens today, tomorrow, and many people have passed away too soon. And there's another issue, and I've dealt with this also. And the thing is, and I think I mentioned this last time, being an attorney is like being a doctor who works in the ER, because other doctors, they just have the regular checkups. The doctor in the ER is always seeing the worst cases every single day. And many of us attorneys are in that situation as well. People come to us when it's too late. And I can't tell you the majority, maybe just off the top of my head, if I'm going to look at my files and tell you how much, what the percentage is between the files that I'm doing in estate planning and the files that things gone wrong and people didn't do. Overwhelmingly, the people who avoided it, those are the files that I have overwhelmingly. So there's a trend, and it seems that, I don't know if it's a lack of information, I don't know if it's a taboo of not wanting to have the conversation, or something just doesn't cross most people's mind. Like, what happens? Most people are not aware, and I'm not faulting them or blaming them. I don't recall if I knew about these things before becoming an attorney and specializing in this area. Most people don't know that if you pass without a will, that the state determines who receives, and it depends who's alive at the time. And we're always having to go back and look at the class of heirs at law and what your situation is, and married, not married, children, siblings, and all that. So for the most part, people are always surprised when I tell them that, if you pass away without a will, the state determines. It's not that they're going to give it to strangers, but we brought up, every estate planning attorney. I think this is one of the big stories that, it's kind of redundant, and I think we mentioned it last time. Prince passed away worth $50 million, had no will. So it's not just people with no resources or somebody who doesn't have much. For whatever reason, here's a guy who spent all his life building an amazing legacy, music, assets, whatever he acquired. Um, and like I don't remember last time I checked. Maybe it's been a while that that case was. Don't quote me on that, but it's been a couple of years since I kind of looked at the update of the case. But it was stuck. It may still be stuck in litigation in court all this time. So it can happen to everybody. For the most part, people with resources, because they have access to attorneys, they go the route of having a trust, and that's why rarely you hear wealthy, people having issues in court or fighting over assets. That's why if you look at certain families, certain companies, they've been around for 100 and 150 years. The people passed away, but the company is still alive today. Why is that? And how is that? Well, because they had access to the information, they had enough resources to talk to their attorneys. So nowadays, things have changed. Everybody has resources. I mean, we're doing this on a YouTube channel, right, where people have access and they watch it for free. So the information is out there. Google is out there. Everything is free. The information is free. But now, how to determine whether this is the right information and what the right thing to do is, this is where you consult an attorney. And most attorneys, well, at least myself, I offer free consultations. And I told you, it's one of those topics that I'm passionate about and I'd like to talk about. So I'm always taking that extra time to speak with my clients and giving them examples and tell them like what happened here, what happened there, when things go wrong. So they can relate to. And this is what we hope to bring here, that we're going to bring up stories and things that went wrong with people so we can learn from their mistakes. We can teach people through other people's mistakes so they don't repeat the same thing, instead of just throwing like these legal concepts and a lawyer trying to push a product on you, which is not the case. It's something that everybody will experience at some point, and we should have that conversation as early as possible.
So thank you, Nick. And so just to again, I mean, timing is valuable, and I know we're gonna do shorter versions of this, and we're gonna break it down. But today specifically, what will it take for someone to start a basic will documentation? What are the basic steps for someone at least to get started, and then ultimately the next episode we can talk about more, the trust, and we can talk about how to appoint folks and stuff. But to your point, the information is available. The legal advice is available, and for
Correct.
So right now it's the basic elements, like what will it take for someone to get started? How long does it take? What will be the step we'll actually have to go through to just at least establish the first will, if you want to call it that way?
Correct. So let's say, well, let me start, and I'm going to answer that question in different steps. So we mentioned that everyone needs a will. So if you're a single person, your will is going to be basic. You just got your first job, you're fresh out of college, you're starting to make money. You want to have that conversation with an attorney because, as we mentioned, it's planning. So everybody plans for their career, and one of the biggest questions they ask in job interviews: "What's your 5-year plan?" So when you think about what your 5-year plan for your career, and it's funny, and I've talked to a lot of people, they seem to have that down pat. Yes, I'm going to get 2 years experience here, 3 years experience there. Once I get to that position, I'm going to apply to that position. I'm going to make X amount of money. Great, great. What's missing from that conversation or from that line of thinking is, how do I protect that? I have yet to meet a person who's not protective over their personal life, their assets, their career, their money, and everything they work hard for. So having a will protects that. So regardless of how much you have now, where you are in life, the basic aspect of it is that will in place will at least protect the foundational protection that you need. And as you move forward, you continue to learn and grow and make money, and we have these conversations. So if you're just a single person, you should have just a basic will, easy conversation with an attorney, looking exactly at what you have, and I always advise people on there. Like, so when we do a consultation, we go through a survey of list of assets, and family members. So it's good to learn as much as possible about the client, and from there we go. So if you're just young and this is your first job and you're early in your career, we draft a basic will that's very general. Most likely you don't have no children or a spouse. You have your parents and your siblings. Years later, now you pursued your 5-year plan. You got the job you wanted. You just got married, or you're a recent couple who just have purchased a house, have a child. We got to start thinking. So the conversation is different. Now we're thinking, okay, you have a house, you have a wife, or you have a husband, and you have a child. The child is minor. What happens if the parents were to pass away in a car accident? That happens, not quite often, but it happens. We see it. On my end, I see these things. So this is where the conversation changes. We start talking about the will is going to be different. Now we're adding what's called a standby guardian provision in the will. So, and we prepare ancillary documents on the side. And what that means is, in the event you start thinking about, okay, in the event that something was to happen to me and my spouse, who's going to care for my minor children? So we'll modify. Now we have a new will, right? We're modifying your plan. Now you have a spouse, you have a child. We need to think about a guardian. We need to think about a trustee. Now we look at the assets. Now hopefully you have much more than you had when you were younger. That is what everybody hopes to work for, right? So now that you're married, you have a spouse, you have children. Now our conversation is different. We're talking about your assets. We're talking about your minor children. I'm getting people to think about who would be the guardian. Now you're having the conversation with your spouse. And for some reason, many people don't have these conversations. And again, when I say that, I'm not trying to put anybody down. It's just I'm trying to bring these things to light. I'm trying to get the conversation started so people can start thinking about these things and these issues that come up. So this is how we modify the estate plan. We look at where you are now and the children. And when I prepare a will, I anticipate that you may have other children in the future. So we make the language as, to cover as broad and inclusive as possible, to include possible children in the future. Now, 5 years later, and it just depends, because everybody's on a different pace in their life. Now you may be, hopefully not, but you may be divorced and your kids are minors. And I'm actually dealing with this situation right now. I'm helping a gentleman. And we were just having a couple of drinks and the conversation came up, and I said, I'm not trying to push a service on you, but this is something that you need to consider. He's a friend of mine. You had a really nasty divorce and you have a minor child. You have assets, now they're done with the divorce. He still has assets, thank God, but I said, okay, what happens now if you pass? Your only heir at law is your child, who's 9 years old, who's under the custody of an ex-wife that you had a really nasty divorce. So now, and you have no will. I said, you went through this nightmare of a divorce, and if something was to happen to you right now, you're going to put your family into another nightmare dealing with probate, because now the estranged ex-wife has to deal with your siblings. They have to get somebody appointed. The money is going to go to a child who's a minor who is under the guardianship or the custody of your ex-wife that you guys apparently, So, we're talking about having a will, organizing, but in his case, actually, the ideal situation is to set up a trust so we can take everything out of his name, and we'll discuss that, on our next topic. But the point of the story is, he wasn't thinking about this, and just conversation that we were having wasn't even a consultation or anything like that. We're just, I'm an attorney and I practice this, and I see the red flags. So I brought it up and I said, you do realize that in the event something was to happen to you today, you were back where you started with the divorce.
Well,
not you, your family. Why? It's unnecessary. So as things happen in your life, as circumstances change, whether personally or financially, you should always, and especially in this, and I was like, we offer free consultations. Talk to a lawyer. Have a conversation with. Everyone should have. Most people don't need criminal attorneys. Hopefully, never a divorce attorney. And I'm not trying, to put attorneys that one. But in this area, I call myself a personal attorney. Somebody who helps you in your personal life to put things in order the right way. So it's a different type of practice. That's why I enjoy the practice, because I'm not out there fighting with other attorneys all day. I'm actually out there talking, having these conversations with people and helping them avoid needing lawyers. We have a great justice system in the United States, but I always tell people the last thing you want to do is be involved in the court system. Having to go, because today, or let's say your kids are 18, 20, and they're young and they still get along and they go out and they have drinks with each other and they're hanging out and all good. But in the future, they're going to get married. And from my side of the table, I see many siblings who I'm sure at some point in life used to go out and play ball together and have drinks together and have a good life. And now there are spouses or there's other circumstances that kind of they drifted apart and they get petty. I think we mentioned a story where a lady was supposed to receive $175,000 and she called me because there was $21 unaccounted for that's going to get split between 4 people, and she wanted to fight the siblings over $21 of interest that was not added to the accounting, which, accounting should always be on point. But the point is, and I'm sure I talked to other attorneys and we share these like struggle stories. Some of the siblings, the things they fight for and they spend money on, but the money, by the way, gets taken off, the estate shrinks more and more and more. So everything you work hard for, if you don't protect it the right way, it can get destroyed fairly quickly and easily. And that money can go to attorneys and to the legal system and court filing fees and serving this party and that party and paying all these fees, all these attorneys, just because you didn't have the conversation, which is a free consultation. And I'm not just pushing the free consultation. The information is out there. I'm trying to push the conversation for people to go out there and look at the resources and utilize the free information, YouTube, Google, learn as much as possible about these things. It's one of these topics, like I said, most people avoid or don't think about. We're too busy with life, living life, that we don't want to think about those days. But unfortunately, we have to, we should. And as part of building a life, building a future, building a legacy, that is one of the most important conversations that everyone should be having.
Well, Nick, thank you. And we're about to come on to the end of the show, but I do want to, because we want to keep this focus, as we said. But here's the thing. You're right. And you and I had this conversation about even myself, right? we talk the talk. We need to walk. So yeah. I to your point, I did have a will a while ago, but that haven't been adjusted, adapted, and a lot of things happened since that. It was literally 10 years ago, and it's time to revisit these things. But you're right, things happen all the time, and ups and downs. Financial goes up, financials go down. Kids grow up. Kids move on. You mentioned funny about siblings. Siblings, sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't. There's in-laws that get involved. There's all kind of things that can happen. People become. It can be a lot. Addictions, all kind of stuff can happen. Yeah. Things change in life, and all of a sudden it turns to the ugly, a concept. And believe it or not, families, everybody watching and listening, if you're a part of family, and you have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. It doesn't matter what family you're from. It's always going to be there. And by the way, if you are in family where there's none, God bless, because that is something that we'd love to actually see more of. But unfortunately, it's just what it is. The law of nature happens, and money can drive divide between people as well. People sometimes get a little obnoxious when they have a lot of it or less of it, and it can become a challenge. And you're right, Nick. This is available. And yes, you mentioned, I'm not trying to push the consultation, but to be honest with you, we should think about consultations. Why not? We consult for everything, and sometimes we forget to consult on the right things. This is something that you want to consult on because you want to at least know what's available to you. And to your point, it's not a difficult, process, especially at least at the basic element. And so I want to close today with just that. So I meet you, we do the consultation, I proceed, I agree, let's proceed. How long does it take to really do this? I mean, you put a document together, we all sign it, it gets filed. I mean, is that
Okay. So, creating the document is fairly quickly. The value in it, because, we mentioned last time, people go to LegalZoom, right? And they can plug in the information and create a will. Of course, as an attorney, we never recommend this because the value is not, there is the value, of course, of the document that you should have. But the actual value is in the consultation and the conversation and why you should always do it with an attorney. Because, like I said, I do real estate, taxes that's related to estate planning, capital gains, real estate taxes, things of that nature, and estate planning. And business, and another thing is the business and the business succession planning. So because I have experience in all these fields, as many attorneys as well, and have experience in things like that. And that is the value what the attorney brings to the table in the consultation is, you can create the document yourself for $150 or whatever the case may be. You plug in the information, but what you're missing out of the conversation is thinking about the minor children, having a conversation of, because it's a personal, one-on-one interaction with the attorney. So I get to know my clients. When I do the consultation, it's not, who's the executor, who's that person, how much money you have, how much they're getting. All right, no problem, we'll create it. If I'm going to offer that service, might as well, you should go and pay a lot less for LegalZoom because that's what I'm giving you. But I don't do that. And hopefully people can see just how quickly this show went by because it's something that I enjoy and talking about, I'm passionate about, and I want to give the value to my clients and to people all the time that I want to get to know you, what you do, what you plans, your children, your family, your assets. So I can come back to you and say, look, I thought this through. And from my experience and from the things that I've seen go wrong, this is what I recommend your estate plan should look like. So it would be, each estate plan would be fitted and, kind of like a suit, it's tailor fitted to you personally, instead of having some generic documents that you think applies to everybody. So the turnaround on creating the document, that's the easiest part. The most important thing is that consultation, knowing if you have minor children, knowing if you're older and you have older children. We've dealt with these cases where one child is on drugs. We don't want to leave them out. The parent doesn't want to leave their kids out, but the parents don't want to give that child all the money so they can smoke it or whatever, the addiction that they have. So that's where the conversation comes. Well, you know what? We're not going to leave this child out. We're going to provide. Then I have the tools that I know how to utilize, whether we set up a supplemental need trust, whether we set up a different type of trust, certain provisions, certain protections to make sure that that child doesn't receive the money and waste it in 24 hours on drugs, parties, whatever the case may be. So that's where the value comes in, because every situation is different, is unique, and I want to get to know the client as much as possible so I can give them a plan that's fitted to them and that helps them, and we can modify the plan. And that's why having the ongoing conversation with an attorney who's familiar with you, your family, your circumstance, kind of like everybody's seen The Godfather, right? Every time he made a decision, it was always with the attorney. It has value. I mean, he knew the value of having these conversations. Just joking about it, but there's a great deal of value that comes out of these conversations, that whether it's taxes, tax savings, things of that nature that come up and we can advise on.
Thank you, Nick. Well, I mean, again, we're wrapping it up, but here's the thing. I mean, your point. I mean, everything we do, you need an expert, right? And we're not experts, and we're experts in what we know, but we're not experts in everything. And unfortunately, that's what fortunately, there are experts out there that we need to ask. And like you said, it doesn't, hurt to ask. And you're right. This is not a generic format, because what works for me may not work for you or anybody else, and circumstances vary. So therefore, it's easier to actually, if you do a generic format of anything, it is what it is. It's not customizable to you and to your needs. And so the idea of talking to you, that's a simple, concept where you can understand get to know them, know what their intricate stuff, and hopefully guide them to the proper way, and maybe devise, the language correctly to what's needed for them at that time, and hopefully, even to your point, make it broader, so for later on, as things change, things can be easily adjusted and adapted. So that's excellent. So Nick, I know we're gonna have plenty of time with you, and we're gonna have this coming back, over and over and over. We're gonna dig in more. But so I do know we don't have your number on the screen, and we will have it on the next show. But what is the number if someone wants to actually call you right now and just kind of start a conversation?
Sure. So I have the direct number to my office is 917-717-5007. Or right. as I like to say, 5007.
Was that intentional? You made that up. That's a good one.
Well, I saw it. Well, when I was looking at the directory and there was a couple of numbers available, that caught my eye. I was like, well, I'll take that one.
Like it. Well, we're definitely going to hold that and put it on this ticker, the ticker here. So next time people will have it, while we're in the show, so they can. So hopefully not call you while we're doing the show. And we will potentially do in the future. I think it will be a good idea. Maybe we do like a live.
Yes, and we're also I'm starting to receive some questions. So if you sent us a question, we haven't forgot about you. I think we're thinking about, because just the time goes by so quick. Next time we'll do the trust, the revocable trust. The show after we'll probably do the irrevocable trust, and somewhere in between maybe we'll do a show after we cover these topics. So we'll take I'll take some of the questions that I've been receiving on estate planning, and we can address them all in one show that will cover the wills, the revocable and irrevocable trust, and everything else in between that we will discuss.
Well, there you have it. Nick, thank you for being with us today. This is your show. This is Legal Tips for Life with Nick Khalifeh, and this is the first one of many. And hopefully you enjoyed what we talked about today, and it's more precise and concise. And we'll do more of that and really dissect it to the minute levels, and you'll have access to him, and definitely reach out to him, and we'll have the information of his site as well, his direct number on the description of the show. So please check it out. And you probably have questions. I know you have questions. We all have questions. So just ask the questions. That's it. I mean, it's really as simple as that. No hesitation. It's not going to cost to ask the question. Whether you send it to us or send it directly, he will get it, and hopefully he'll give you the response that you at least need at the time, and then we'll take it from there. So Nick, I want to thank you for being with us today. I mean, the time is always flying here. It's not even funny. I mean, last time 2 hours and it was quick. So 1 hour was enough for a basic element here. But we'll make it work. We'll make it work. So we're not in a rush. We're going to do this as a series. So we'll have plenty of information to share. And hopefully you'll find value into it. And hopefully we'll save and help, a lot of you out there. And again, this is more for New York. But believe it or not, it may be for anybody else actually outside of New York City or New York State, because these laws are almost in every state, maybe vary. And, I know, Nick, you might have other additional folks out there that you can refer people to. So, hey, we can talk about that as well. So, Nick, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Folks, thank you for being with us today. Hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll be looking for the next one. So we'll talk soon. Bye for now.